welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today, I have two very special guests to the podcast, and I am so excited. So please let me introduce them. First, she is an actor, comedian, podcaster. She was Tom Sandoval's personal assistant until she was fired on national television. And she would love to tell you more, but she signed an NDA. Please welcome to the show, Ann Maddox.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And she's a podcaster, comedian, and allegedly a writer based in LA. She's from Boston, and if you're assuming she's an asshole about sports, you are correct. If your voice sounds familiar, you may have heard her on Vial Files. Please welcome to the show, Amanda Lifford.
Yes!
So for everybody who wants to be in the know, when I have guests on my show, I am able to identify who I am, and I just put Bish. So that's the first thing they saw.
Everybody change your professional Zoom to Bish. It's a great way to enter a Zoom room. You feel safe immediately.
Yeah. Literally. And that's the goal. Just making people feel safe. It's not, whatever. So you two ladies, I'm so lucky to have you here. You have started a podcast together called, as Tom Sandoval incorrectly called it, called We Signed an NDA podcast.
Yes.
And so what I first want to do is have you tell my listeners a little bit about the pod and what it's all about. Now, Tom infamously slammed Anne for having this podcast, and Jax, because, these men on these shows, they love to just throw a woman under the bus.
Okay, take it from the top. Our podcast is about seeing Hollywood from the point of view of assistants and the support staff, and seeing, they get kind of like a different view of what we see on television, because they work kind of behind the scenes, and they have intimate relationships with the people that we all love to watch on television. And also Funnies and Sillies.
So doing what I do for a living, when Maddie contacted me about doing the show together, I was like, I have 1 million questions for you all, because it's such a interesting, I talk a lot about parasocial relationships, right? Which is these relationships that fans have with a celebrity, but there's two interesting things here. There's a parasocial relationship and a parasocial attachment. And an attachment is when we actually have we've maybe had contact or communication with the person, if that makes sense. So I want to ask both of you, what is it like to be an assistant to someone? For example, Anne, you were shot into stardom, right? When you were on VPR season 11. And here's the thing. I know you're an actor and you both have done a lot of things before this. You're both very accomplished. But what was that like? And Amanda, for you too, being on Vial Files, if you want to talk about this, to have these relationships with people that it's you see them on TV, they're in the media, and you're working for them. That must be so fascinating. What's that like?
It truly is fascinating. When I first started working for Tom, I hadn't watched Vanderpump Rules yet, so our relationship was very much my boss. He's a fun, silly, interesting goofball. And then after 3 months, and he was like, hey, let's make this full time. I was like, great. I realized I loved Bravo. I watched Below Deck and Project Runway, but I didn't watch a lot of the other shows because I don't know. I think I'm a sensitive person, and seeing people in compromised positions makes me so sad sometimes.
Sure.
But then I was like, I should support my boss. So I started watching the show, and I fell in love with the show. I was obsessed. I promised Schwartz that I would only watch the first season because he didn't want me to see his other stuff, but I blasted through everything. I had to tell him I'm so sorry. I saw everything. I've seen it all.
I saw all your crappy behavior, sir. Yeah. So you can't hide from me.
I saw you take a dump in a toilet while
I was literally taking a battered wife.
Yeah. Which is my favorite moment on the show, truly. Those 2 episodes. Oh. And Ariana being like, we got the dip and the alcohol, we're fine. Like, it was just, they should have won an Emmy that year. So yeah, it definitely like kind of pivoted my view a little bit. Like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, I'm seeing another side of my boss that I didn't know existed. Yes. Yeah, like he grew a dimension, I guess.
And that's what I'm wondering too. And of course, Amanda, please, you know, I want to hear from you because your history has been so fascinating too. But like, how different is it? You know, like knowing somebody in real life and then seeing them on the show, my therapist brain is like, I'm like that meme where there's all these math symbols and I'm like, how does that work and feel for you all, you know?
Yeah, it's so complicated because it's like, I think there's already kind of this question for the public in terms of like how someone is as like an individual who we would like know in a more like personal way versus like a content creator on Instagram. And then with reality TV, it's even more magnified because this idea that they're not in control of their edit. So somehow it might be more like authentic in certain ways than what they might choose to put out into the world about themselves. But then also there's this kind of like discourse about how like, oh no, the edit can really like twist and manipulate things. So I think it's like this huge question that everybody is really curious about on the internet is like, how personal is this? Like, how much can we take what you say personally and like consider this who you are as an individual? And I think for me, like, especially like kind of with like specifically the assistant support staff element of our show, like during my time on the Vial Files, we interviewed so many different people, you know, so many housewives, so many people from like Netflix shows, Bachelor, like all different franchises. And not only was it super interesting to see the difference between how these people would appear on TV and like what it's like to be in a room with them, but like specifically like how do they treat an assistant or like the co-host or the sidekick? Because like, of course, like, you know, for my old boss, like he's such an established player in this industry. It's like, of course you're going to treat him a certain way. And I felt like there was almost, in a certain regard, even more insight that you could glean because I was a tiny bit further on like the wallflower spectrum of like a little more under the radar.
I was also really surprised by how like the stuff you see, the emotional reactions on the show are very real, which is so fascinating to me because like in the comedy acting world, like you present, you know, a certain side of you, the giggly, like, hey, I'm on, you know, and then
you have a facade, you have this kind of a part of you that's performative, right?
Yes, yeah, totally. And then you get off the stage and then you're yourself. But like, it's so interesting because when you see my bosses, when you see anyone like on the reality show, like this specific reality show, like I worked on other reality shows as like a transcriber, and a lot of it is produced and written, and Vanderpump is produced, but like there's like a sense of when they're off camera, they're professional, like, hello, nice to meet you, we're doing business. Like, you know, as an assistant, I see that side. And then when they're on camera, their actual emotions get stirred up and their reactions to, like, whatever happened is very real and has real consequences, which is, like, ripping my brain in half.
It's like the opposite of professionalism. Like how for most people might be very like composed and like might use language on a work email that they would never use when texting their friends. It's almost like the opposite because it's like an environment where like the more drama you can elicit and the more like just like funny, dynamic, out of pocket, raw things you can say, the better your show is going to do, apparently.
Yeah. It's like they're trained to kind of have their real emotions just like I don't know, come out.
Like unleash, like essentially. Okay, so what I'm hearing is it's like someone like put like taking a stake in front of a tiger and being like, okay, we've set this whole thing up, but now let's throw it at the tiger and let them, devour it, kind of situation.
Yeah.
And that's the fascinating stuff that I couldn't wait to talk to you ladies about, because I do think it's so fascinating how people treat you when they don't think you're somebody.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I just feel that speaks so much to people's character and what's wild. And so for my audience, the one thing I did skip over that I want to define is an NDA, because not everybody knows. So an NDA stands for a non-disclosure agreement. But can you ladies talk about what exactly, because I'm the East Coast, I'm like, I don't know nothing about that. So Can you explain a little bit about what a typical NDA is, what that might look like in your experiences?
Yeah,
yeah.
I can.
Please,
my
please.
legal studies major from college. I was going to go to law school, and now I'm doing this. So.
Really?
So, dear God, I hope I can explain what an NDA is.
That, first of all, that's amazing. We're going to have to circle back to that, but
it's never too late. I might, if it all goes to shit, I might go back to law school. But an NDA, there's a lot of agreements that are kind of like similar. Like, I think one of the pieces of paperwork that I signed for a former job was technically like a confidentiality agreement. NDA, I think, is the kind of most like buzzword recognizable one. And it's basically just saying that, like, as somebody who is entering into, I think typically it's like a working relationship, but like you've seen crazy stories about people being like, oh, I had sex with a celebrity and they made me sign an NDA. So it's just a legal document that like creates parameters on what you are and are not allowed to share. So like in a business sense, a lot of times this would be like, you're not allowed to disclose like trade secrets that might, or like ways that the company does business, where if everybody else knew it, then it would undermine this company's like business practices. But also in kind of, especially in the more like personal assistant context, for a lot of times, it's like, I think in a lot of ways, it's like a piece of paper that acknowledges that like, some shit. And so you're saying, I will not tell anyone this because I realize I am privy to some stuff that is confidential, and that in order for you to interface with me, there needs to be a level of like trust and also legal backing to ensure that you're not going to go blabbing and like telling people stuff that you see when you're on the job.
Such a good description. And I feel that for me, what's fascinating about all of that, and in my world, so there is a little bit of crossover between, we signed an NDA and your bitch therapist, because I get a lot of info, like a lot. Like, I know some stuff. Yeah. But there's between confidentiality in my private experiences, which I take very seriously. Like, I don't sign NDAs, but like, I have to make a decision when I'm interacting with like a Bravo lab to just maintain those private conversations. And if I didn't, I could blow some stuff up. Let me say that. And so, go ahead, Amanda.
No, like, I what you're saying resonates so much, because I totally respect why this would be a practice used by like employers and especially public figures. But for me, it's like the more relevant thing is like, what do we owe each other as human beings? Like, not are you going to sue me? Like with this podcast, it's like, there's definitely some stuff that we would like to discuss from our vantage point. There are things that like conversations that are lacking in Hollywood right now that we want to start. Yeah. But we want to do those in ways that are using our access to people like with character and integrity. And so for me, it's like, I'm not saying this stuff because I'm scared shitless you could sue me about XYZ thing. Like, the more relevant thing for me is just like, as a human being, how am I going to feel about myself if I know you've given me this information and and I'm using it XYZ kind of way? Like, that's my barometer. And so it's like, I think to what you're saying, it's like, there's like the emotional NDA that we sign with each other in the form of trust.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, I've listened to a couple episodes of the podcast and it's really good. And the one thing, seriously, it really is good. And the one thing I love about you both, well, all of you really, because there is a team behind you too. There's Maddie, there's Oscar, there's a couple people.
Yeah, Brendan, we like,
I mean,
Molly, all these amazing folks at Parody. So I just like want to say their names whenever we get the opportunity to, because they are heroes. And like, you know, Maddie is our
oh my God. Maddie is, she is our everything. We'd be lost without her, truly.
Yeah. But I think that one of the things that struck me most when I was listening to the podcast is exactly what you're talking about, is that I feel in this space, there's a lack of humanity. There's a lack of dignity and integrity. And what I appreciate about you two is that we seem to have the same morals, values, and ethics, and move from that place rather than from a place of like, I want to be famous. I want to be in the limelight. And so I think, you know, Anne, especially for you, because you were the subject of, oh my gosh, I was like, and that's how we connected, by the way. Every week I would be like, justice for Anne. And that's how you and I would connect. Because I was like, this is not right how this woman is being treated. But it just must be such a wild experience to be so misunderstood. You know, because do you feel like you were misrepresented a little bit on VPR? And again, I'm not sure what you can talk about or what you can't, but how did you feel your edit was, you know, on the season?
I was, I guess, a little more struck by like what didn't make it to air. There were some moments that I was like, oh, this is very juicy. This will definitely make it to air. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. It didn't. Like, what?
Interesting.
Ooh, yeah. I'm like, oh, I wonder why. Yeah.
And I'm sure you can't talk about that, right? Like, what doesn't make it to air? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
just to be on the safe side. I know. I really want to. And when there's a time that I'm allowed to, I'll be like, this is what happened.
Yeah, we're all going to need to know that, but I totally respect your boundaries. So
yeah, thank you.
Sure.
But I don't know. I guess like I see myself be myself pretty. That's me. I don't know. I definitely you know what? Actually, I had a temp job recently, and my bosses were like, oh, that's so funny, we saw you on the show and we thought you're like a lot meeker, and you know, but we meet you in real life and you're kind of like a little loud and like silly too often.
And you're confident.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
you're
you.
I think you're like, you have a real like energy in a room where like I think people feel very like magnetized towards you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, that's very nice of you to say.
I actually think both of you do, because truly, and it's nice. I like to see you together because it's like, one of the things people like about me is I'm just authentic. I'm myself. I'm not here for the limelight. I'm just going to say, you know, how I feel. But you can sense when there's like a joyful authenticity to people. And I do feel like you both really do have that. And I was listening to the podcast and I was like, this is like great. I mean, you laugh, you have a kiki, you talk about some great stuff. And by the way, I do want to read the description of the pod. It's a comedy podcast that dissects pop culture, modern celebrity with a focus on reality TV, and platforms the voices that Hollywood overlooks, which for me, that is really special, because I think, first of all, I don't understand LA at all. I live on the East Coast and it seems wild to me. It just seems like its own microcosm of insanity. Is that kind of, that's kind of about it.
Yeah. And it's such a young industry that like, there's so many rules that they're trying to figure out, or like the people who can manipulate these rules like kind of use it as an advantage. But I feel like because it's like so young and it is a little lawless, like the Wild West a little bit in terms of like some ethical values. We have to talk about it. But it's always easy, like both of us are comedians, it's always easy to talk about things that mean a lot to us, but like through a comical standpoint, like I don't know. Yeah.
No, I feel like it's like how we look back at the like children in coal mines. We're like, what the hell were we thinking? Like,
yeah. Like, the uranium girls, the match girls. Like,
literally, like I think there's going to be, and I'm not saying all elements of it, but like I think there's going to be parallels between like ways that we have ceased to protect, regulate, sort of just like generally create space for or create a better environment for reality TV stars.
Yeah.
Like that we're not doing that now, and we're going to look back and be like, what the fuck? That was like, you know, and it's like, it's really sad when you think about like the very real mental health consequences
Yeah.
that are a result of this lack of like regulation, both like TV wise, but then also just like socially on social media.
Yeah.
Yes, and I swear that's where I come in, because I feel that we are seeing, especially on Vanderpump Rules, all these wild clinical concepts, and there's no explanation. There's very rarely trigger warnings, which is one of my biggest beefs, because it's not hard to put something up when we're talking about, you know, really hard topics. But I feel like for me, it was like, I want to come into this space and make something good out of something that inherently is a kind of gross. And, you know, yes, it's fun, it's entertainment, but there is such important people and important stuff going on behind the scenes that I feel like you guys, well, you ladies and myself we're coming from this perspective of like, let's make something great out of something that might be inherently a little icky.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Like the troublemakers aren't the people who like see and discuss and talk and break down, you know, the relationships of everyone. The troublemakers are the people who are silencing the assistants, or the people who are getting like shit on, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
And going back to our previous conversation where, you know, I want to circle back to that, where you talked about, you all must have the most wild stories of these people who maybe you felt one way about, and then you see how they treat an assistant, or you see how they treat someone behind the scenes, and it like completely alters your way of thinking of them. And you're both nodding vigorously. And obviously I know you can't talk about it, but emotionally, can you tell me a little bit, what is that like for you both, to have this feeling that you enjoy someone and then you see them in real life and it's just this weird kind of conflict? What's that like?
It's heartbreaking. I mean, like, like taking, you know, my old boss out of the picture, like, you know, there'll be like someone who works in the industry that's, you know, that's a woman, and I like look up to her and I think they're amazing, and then you meet them in real life and you're like, oh, you're so mean to the people who work for you. Like, you're out of touch. You're not, like, I looked at you as a hero, and now, and now I don't know how to, like, accept this.
You don't know how to. So the psychological concept for it is called cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And cognitive dissonance is where you have like this one view or one thought, and then something happens and it shifts it. And so we have one of two options, and this explains some behavior on social media. So your one option is to feel the feeling, to be disappointed and be like, well, I guess I'm changing my view. But then the other thing that a lot of people do is it's like, well, I don't want to believe that I'm wrong, so I'm just going to continue with this belief that this person is amazing despite the evidence that I've seen against it. And really, it's like a protective mechanism that our brains do, because I do imagine that is a hurtful process. Well, I've experienced that myself too. People that prior to this, I kind of like had, you know, not that I looked up to, but I was like, oh, I like this person. And then I talked to them and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. That's it.
And it's also, it's like hard, because I think, you know, like something that I think we talk about a lot, like on our show, and then just that exists in discourse in general, is just this idea that like celebrities have zero strikes. Like, they're not allowed to have one dinner where they don't look like, you know, aren't like perfectly polite to a waiter. Now, for me, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty fucking easy to be like
it's
humanizing
so easy.
and polite to. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Right?
That being said, like, I do think it is thinking about people for whom like every action is so scrutinized, and every interaction, like it for every single person like who meets XYZ celebrity, it is like one of the most exciting days of their year, if not decade. And for this like celebrity, it's like, it's that every single day, like being on the receiving end of it. So I think there's also this like sadness, not only of like how someone might kind of differ from what you expect of them, but also from like seeing what it looks like to actually live the life of someone who has such a presence and so many expectations placed on them by their fans and the public.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because it's like people do this thing with me on social media where it's like, well, I thought you were a therapist. And it's like, does that mean I'm not supposed to be human or have an opinion or have a bad day or be wrong? Like, so I feel that sometimes, whether it's professionals or celebrity, your point is that, like, yeah, there's crappy behavior, but there's also people who are just like, it's a wild lifestyle and that's their everyday. And no one is pleasant and happy every day all the time. I mean, listen, I think the three of us are rare examples of humans that no matter what we're dealing with, we're going to be kind and pleasant to people. I don't believe in our misery being a reason to just like be shitty to people, but there are a lot of people who subscribe to that, and we're just not those folks.
Yeah.
Unless it's about sports.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Celtics. Well, I don't know. I'm like,
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, in this house, we live on the East Coast, and we are a Philly sports family. So, and listen, I don't really care too much about sports, but my husband would fight you to the death on that.
But okay, here's the thing. I adore people from Philly because it's like same but different, where it's like, I know we're at the end of the day rooting for different teams, but we take the exact same approach. We have the same level of intensity.
Same
so
energy.
It's like, I deeply respect like the fervor and feralness that comes from Philly sports fans.
Yeah, I was going to say, you framed it really nicely, but it's kind of feral insanity, like Philly fans. And listen, I lived in Philly for a long time, and it was one of my favorite places that I've ever lived. But people there are intense about sports.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a part of that it's like, all right, you're not making money from the team winning. You don't own it. Like, let's just take a beat.
Well, it's one of those moments where you're like, call your dad. Like, I think so many times when I watch Men Watch Sports, I'm like, just fucking call your dad, man. A lot of stuff is coming up.
Tell him you love him. Yeah.
Like, I don't have a therapy degree, but I do think it's like very similar to the reality TV world. It's like,
yes,
the reason we're so intrigued by this is because obviously this is an outlet for us to experience stuff that we experience life in a more detached, low stakes, like fun way. Just like with sports and reality TV.
Yeah.
That is such a solid point. I think what Bravo is to us, sports is to you know, cis, you know, kind of men. And, you know, of all sexual orientations, but specifically cis men, cis straight men. And I do think that there is a certain amount of projection of like, you know, for all of us, of like, we're invested in these people's lives. And so again, I want to go back for a second. It's like weird. It must be so weird to be invested in someone's life, but then like working for them. And you're invested on a personal level. Because, Anne, one thing you said in one of the podcasts that I was listening to is that Tom and Ariana were kind of like a family to you when you had a loss, the loss of your father.
Yeah.
And it really did. Oh my gosh, I teared up when I was listening to it, because I'm like, so you really did have emotional consequences and mental health consequences of what happened between the two of them. It really did impact you.
Yeah, it really did. I started working there during the pandemic, so you know, you kind of limit the amount of people you get to see during that time. And I was there like almost every day, and you grow close to, you know, when 3 people are in a house and you can't really talk to other people or see other people, but you all been tested and cleared and you could talk to each other, you start developing a relationship kind of faster than you would working for, you know, in an office situation.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, for a long time, I just really looked forward to hanging out with them and going to work. And it was like kind of this like honeymoon phase. And, you know, and then when my dad passed, I was at work. I was at the house when I got the call. And, like Ariana literally had to scoop me up off the ground. Like, and I have so much gratitude for both of them for, you know, stepping up to the plate when it happened. And like, Ariana has experienced the same thing. What's interesting is that both our dad's names are James Maddox. I found out, which is I don't know why that strikes me, yeah.
Well, it's certainly, it feels like there's a connectedness to the two of you.
Serendipity.
Yeah. Like a universe is saying this is not just a coincidence. There's some sort of connectedness. Yeah.
Yeah. And, sorry, I'm like getting like teared up just thinking about it, but like.
That's okay. We allow that here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I didn't even have to say anything. Like, they just like let me sob as much as I needed, and they, without saying anything, like bought a plane ticket for me, like made sure that like I was able to get home and pack a bag, and they were like, it doesn't matter, you'll figure it out when you get there. Like they truly supported me, and I will never forget that. And so when you kind of start looking like it started feeling kind of like a work family,
Right.
And and so when everything happened, I was truly devastated. Like at the peak of happiness, you're like, God, I love my job. This is so great. Like, this is what I wanted. And then you find out something devastating, and you're like, I guess what I was feeling wasn't really there, or like it wasn't what I thought it was, or I don't know. I'm still wrapping my brain around it. Clearly, you can see me like trying to process it, and not articulating it quite well, but yeah, I guess mainly viewing Tom, like he wasn't the person who I thought he was, and that as someone with PTSD, C-PTSD, like that's. It takes me a lot longer to like process my emotions and thoughts and feelings. Right. So I'm still trying to understand like who is this person really sometimes, which can be kind of, I don't know, makes me a little anxious.
Sure.
Like, am I safe? Am I not safe? Sorry.
Of course. And no. Don't apologize. I think that and I appreciate, Anne, you bringing that up, because I also have been diagnosed with C-PTSD. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I had a lot of trauma before that. Yeah. And so I think what I really too loved about your podcast, and why I'm pointing that out to my listeners, is a lot of my listeners are trauma survivors and people who have been marginalized, who have been scapegoated, all of these things that I feel like I'm an advocate and I'm a voice for how challenging it is to live with some of these health issues, right? Yeah. And so, it's like at the end of the day, it's for you, it's not just a TV show. This was your life. And what I appreciate you saying about all this is that, number one, it's absolutely okay to still be processing that, because this was your life too. Yeah. But number two, I want people listening to this to understand, if this was what it felt like for you, for Ariana, I think there's this narrative that it's like, well, who cares? Get over it. You didn't have kids. It's like enough already. And it's like, bro, that's not how feelings work, okay? Yeah. Like, stop trying to tell people how to have their feelings. And it's just, it's one of the things that I really like to speak about, because it's no fun to feel that kind of icky, marginalized feeling, and then to have all these people with opinions online shouting them into the void. Like, that must be really tough for you guys too.
Yeah, like, I just want to protect when those episodes were airing and people were like, like, I don't know, like, let him have his birthday party, and I wanted to be like, you guys, this is like literally 2 months after she found out everything, like, right. Like, I felt terrible asking her if we could do this, because I just felt like it was inappropriate. Like, if both parties respected each other, like, he would have his party somewhere else where she wouldn't have to like deal with it, like, right. That's a sensitive thing to do. So it's like, I'm so sorry. I think I'm losing my train of thought.
No, you're also like, if I could just speak to like, also in the response to that, like Anne was getting, it's like, well, it's like, first of all, I'm like lucky enough to be like, you're my wife, you're one of my best friends in the whole world. I love you so much. So,
I
like,
love you
I know
so
you
much.
on this personal level. I also know, like, how much time and energy you put into like therapy and like your own mental health, and that you're like an incredibly hardworking in all elements of life, and that includes in the way you like make sense of like very difficult, challenging things. And so like as a friend who has that vantage point, that insight, and can like go to bat for Anne's character because she's an incredibly high character, amazing person, like, and then you see people on the internet just like so blasé and so like casually saying things that are just like horrifically false, and like such a disservice to like the empathy Anne has and like the kindness she has. Like there is this level where it's just like, damn, like we're just speaking in different scales here, and like in your internet scale, of course you don't have space for like the magnitude of hurt that it would feel to have a betrayal of a life partner of like over 10 years, who's like putting you in a compromising situation, like medically, physically, by like having sex with someone you don't know who they're having sex with, who is betraying you, who is like, you know, it's just like, of course, like you're not here to fully like
understand what you're saying is that the internet, are you saying that the internet comments on things they don't understand, Amanda? Wow.
And let me just say, I think I'm the first person to say this. I think I might be. I think I'm onto something here.
The internet, they love to be like, I know you, and I know you. And it's like, do you know our lives? Because I'm pretty sure I've never met you, and you've never commented on my page before. So what are you talking about? But like, again, one of the reasons I'm so glad to have you both here is because I do think, you know, and certainly you've gotten short shrift just by the nature of your job, which kind of turned your life then upside down. But it, you know, I think it's important to note and for people to hear that you go to therapy, which,
Yay! I love therapy. Everyone should do it. Literally everyone do it. We need it.
Well, I'm glad it's someone else saying it and not just me. But I told my therapist the other day, I was like, listen, girl, we're in this until one of us dies, so buckle up. Because this is never ending for me. Okay, just so you know that.
I'm the same. I'm the exact same. But I do want to point out that, like, I think people sometimes don't put in the connection, the amount of violation that, you know, when you're with a partner for 9 years and this person was like having a secret relationship, the amount of, you know, like Amanda said, like not only are you emotionally violated, but you're physically violated. Like you're having, you know, a sexual relationship with someone where you don't know all the facts, and that puts you physically in danger. And I like that is, I feel like that part is kind of skipped over often in this discussion.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's skipped over because misogyny, if I'm being honest. I think that what you're saying, and for people who aren't familiar with C-PTSD, what people like Anne and I deal with is a feeling of having our safety threatened for reasons that maybe it's not, but it just feels that way because of the history of trauma that has happened. And so sometimes we can have a hard time trusting. And, you know, there can be, it's like you feel one thing about this situation, but it's really from something that happened. It really is a challenge, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Navigating CPSD can be a blood-soaked nightmare sometimes. Yeah. And so I give you a lot of credit, people dealing with that, because it really is hard. And people look at me and they're like, oh, you're so together, you're a therapist. And I'm like, I'm managing this just like everybody else. Yeah. So I think what we're saying here is that sometimes there's a difference between the facade of something, what we're seeing, and what's actually happening behind the scenes. Yeah. And for all of us, that's why it's important to take a human approach, right? Because everyone's dealing with something that we know nothing about. Yeah. And what I can appreciate about what you two are both saying is that, you know, you're not saying that Tom is a terrible guy. You're saying he's, you know, he and Ariana did these things to help me. It felt like a family. You felt disappointed. You felt let down. You felt betrayed. And that is absolutely more than fair. I think that's more than fair to say.
Thank you. Yeah. And like, I love Ariana so much that knowing somebody who, you know, potentially is supposed to love her and like protect her, and I trusted him, you know, with my friend, to do that to her, like, enrages me.
Yeah. I mean, as it should. That's an appropriate response. Because, you know, the sexual part of it, when you're doing that and you're putting someone's physical safety at risk and you're taking away someone's ability to consent.
Yes.
And that, I think, for me, is the most egregious thing about cheating in general. It's like, that is the part that gets skipped over. The potential, well, what about my health? And do I need to get, you know, an STD panel and get this checked out? And it takes a level of betrayal and makes you feel unsafe in your own body, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Just doing, you know, like an STD check is already nerve-wracking, you know, and to do that with this emotional mindset of, like, someone I trusted for the last 9 years is putting me in a position where I'm afraid I could be in danger. I'm at the doctor doing this alone. Like, that alone fucking sucks. Like, I'm so sorry.
No, we can curse here. Yeah,
okay.
We're allowed. It's my show and I love the F word.
Amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I lost my train. I'm so sorry. I think I'm losing my train. Sometimes with C-PTSD, when I'm talking about these things, my brain just, like, deletes. Like, everything just goes, like... I call it
short-circuiting.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm talking about something that's a really challenging topic that I've experienced personally, but maybe I'm not talking about it personally, my brain is just like, bzz, 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 and I just, that's what I call it. So, no need to apologize, and, you know, I think that, again, it's this authenticity that people really love about all of us, so, you know, let it rip, Tater Chip.
I love that. Tater Chip.
But Amanda, so, you know, Anne has kind of been thrust into the limelight and, you know, all these things. So you two seem to just have, like, have you guys been friends for a long time? Like, tell me a little bit about your relationship.
Yeah, I met Anne. And the first time I met her, I was kind of furious because I was like, how dare someone be this funny and silly? Like, how dare she? It's inappropriate. It's bad for the improv community at large for someone to be, like, going this balls to the wall. No, but, like, I truly, like, my heart was, like, flooded because I was like, oh my God, I've never met someone who I've found to be silly in a way that I specifically just enjoy so much. And so we met through improv. And I think also, like... I think that something that's, like, so special about being friends with Anne is that I think both of us are maybe used to being the most, like, kind of, like, yay, like, very, I think we're both very expressive people and, like, hopefully pretty warm, or at least that's very much how I experience Anne. So it's, like, the first time I've had a friend who, like,
matches
like,
your energy,
mirrors me. Yeah. And I have so many friends who are, like, spectacular and amazing and, like, provide warmth and love in, like, other ways. And with Anne, there's something so special about the fact that it's so verbal and it's so external. And so I think for us, like, meeting through comedy, and with improv, it's like you find out if you like people real quick, because when people can say literally whatever the fuck they want, it is so telling what they choose to say. And so, like, I think this, like, shared foundation of, like, I find you super funny, which means, like, there's a really, like, intricate level of, like, worldview that we're aligned on, and, like, I just, like, you're amazing, you're smart, you're funny, and then also both of us work in this reality TV space, and, like, I think we just found that we could, like, relate to one another about how it feels like I was thinking about this in discussing kind of cheating and Tom's behavior specifically earlier, of just, like, how complicated it is, because it's, like, on one hand, it's like, if I hear that someone has allegedly recorded someone without their consent, that to me is, like, kind of a fireable offense in my book of, like, I'm probably not going to associate with this person at all. But in whether it's because you're working for someone or whether it's because you're discussing a show that they're on, like, having continued contact with someone who might do things that who might have, like, been the perpetrator of behavior you, like, vehemently disagree with, but also where you're in a situation where you're not just condemning and ignoring them, you're continuing to discuss them and trying to use nuance. Like, I don't want to just view Tom as, like, some, like, I really don't, like, I think we're very mindful. We don't want our show to be, like, some, like, shit on bosses, like, find these people who are in power and abused it, or, like, whatever else assistants might feel about their bosses. But, like, so it just, like, that, having to do that mental work of, like, how can I, like, really hate certain things will also see where they're coming from, understand the ways in which they are genuinely trying to be a good person. This is so goddamn long-winded, but it's all just saying it's such a nuanced space. And I think like talking to Anne about it, it was like, oh, this is somebody who can like hold all of these different complicated interwoven truths and facts at once. And like, just like, it's so wonderful. I love exploring stuff with her. So I feel like that was kind of like why we were like had this like beautiful foundation.
Yes. Oh my God. I love you so much. I could like cry just hearing you say all this. Oh my God.
You two are so cute. I can't even stand it. And it's like, I'm not kidding. I'm so jealous because I do this completely by myself.
I can't
imagine.
It is
so brave.
Yes. Yes.
Well, brave, thank you. Maybe stupid. I don't know.
No.
But it's like that what I hear, what I love about your podcast is you two have each other's backs. You, like you
She's
said,
my
you
wife.
match.
Yeah.
Well, I love that, and I'm here for it. And I'm trying to find me a wife who matches my energy too, please, somebody. Because it what you're saying is essentially is that it just makes you both feel less alone. It makes you feel understood.
Yes.
It makes you feel, and so for me, I was actually just talking with someone about this, is that in this space, I feel very alone. I don't have like partners. I don't have people to help me. I'm literally a one-man band. I record myself. I edit myself. I upload. I have zero, like I have nobody. And so I feel that what I love is you two have this like relationship that is so genuinely loving and sweet, and that comes across to the listeners. I mean, it's just genuinely like seeing women support each other, not tear each other down is great, number one. But number two, Amanda, something you said that really stuck with me is that what I love about all of us is we're trying to be fair. We're not trying to be like, oh, forget Tom or forget Carl or, whoever. It's like, let's just be fair when we're looking at human behavior. And we can say, these behaviors were not acceptable, but also not completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Demonize the person, essentially, is what you're saying. And I just love that approach, because that's what I try to take too, is these are people who we are watching. I don't know them. I'm not their therapist. And we're just trying to make something good out of something that we all enjoy. And ultimately, I think that's what you two do. That's really amazing.
Thank you. And,
Yeah,
and I think Amanda has kind of the same like belief as me, that there's like people, you see a lot of like art, like I love Todd Solondz's movies, but like where he kind of has this like darker point of view that like people don't change, like you are who you are, and then you die. But like I think I think like Amanda and I, we both have this like core belief that like, no, humans are capable of learning. Our greatest strength is that we can evolve. Like that is like the thing that, rhinos have a horn on their nose to get their predators, but we have evolution. Like that is what we use to survive. And like, we could change. Yeah. Thank you.
And you know what? No, you're so right. But the one thing I do always say, the caveat to that is I agree that everyone can change, only asterisk if they want to.
Yes. Right. That part. They have to want to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you see people on TV just doing the same thing over and over and over, it's like, I'm going to use Jax as an example.
Yeah. Jax is the same example.
I'm sorry, I thought we couldn't swear on this podcast.
Touche, honey, touche.
Jax is a slur to me.
I'm not kidding. In this house, it is also. I'm like, I can't with that guy. I mean, in fact, truly, I did not watch the first couple seasons of VPR because I felt allergic to Jax, like physically allergic.
Yeah.
So, I think that we're just kind of on this interesting path. And so I guess one thing I did want to go back to quick, that's Anne, I think you had said, is that you have worked as a transcriber. And that is super interesting to me, because you said, so, and I know you can't talk about specifics, but like, so on a scale from like 1 to 10 in terms of like, so did you literally transcribe like scripts for people on reality TV? Is that literally what you did?
Yeah, they would send in all the raw footage, and then the transcriber will, for when I first started, we literally used like VHS tapes or like any sort of tape. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm over 40, so I understand that reference.
Thank you.
VHS was all we had, honey, in the 80s.
And we would pop it in, and then we would, like, they would do their sit-down interviews, like you see on VPR, like they're in their nice outfit, and there's, like, a bar behind them, And we would watch that and write down verbatim every like, ooh, you write it down, or, like, any sort of interesting moment you could, like, put in parentheses, like, they make a face, they're not happy, or, anything that the story producers are like, we need this. We need a moment where, like, even, and sometimes they do this in reality TV where they need a reaction that's, like, kind of out of context, like someone rolling their eyes or something. So you'll write down, like, parentheses, rolling eyes, and then they could use that clip whenever they need someone to, like, roll their eyes.
That's how it, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating to me. So on a scale of like 1 to 10, how produced, I mean, you probably can't say, like, people talk about VPR being very produced, and I know you guys already both spoke to the fact that the reactions are real, but I get the sense that behind the scenes, it's like, okay, this is going to be a gross analogy, but you know how, like, on, like, sets of, like, porn where there's fluffers? I get the sense that there's, like, emotional fluffers.
Yes.
Is that at all accurate?
yes.
Okay, let's get really whipped up about this, and then point them at the camera and say, go. Like, is that kind of how it happens?
Yeah. Oh, my God, that you, like, nailed it. Like, so there's different shows I've worked on do it differently. Like, for example, I worked on Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, and a lot of that.
You did? Okay.
I did,
well,
yeah.
You guys are going to have to come back because I'm going to need to know more about that. But
love. Okay. A lot of that is very, like, staged. Like, they'll, they're kind of just, like, they're showing a part of their life that is very controlled, like, and a lot of it is like, the producers kind of write what the episode is going to be, and then they follow that template. So it feels a little more like an improvised show, but it's like based off of things that actually happened to them in their life. Whereas Vanderpump, it was shocking how real it was, like their fights, the problems they have with each other are real problems, are real resentments, are real, like, their friendship dynamic. They really do spend all their time together. They're a good, close-knit group of friends. It might not be...
were.
Yeah, they were.
I don't think they are anymore, but...
Yeah. And,
we're all
ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think because it's this dynamic where they work together, live together, are friends together, is just the bacteria could grow faster.
The boundaries get very muddied, and I think, okay, so then that leads to just I don't know the word you want to call it, but muddied boundaries is the feeling that I got from VPR. And listen, a muddied boundary also has a lot of psychological effects on people. I also don't think most folks realize that, is that when you're on a show or what have you, that kind of the group energy, the sociological standards and norms and all of these things, it has effects on people, not only in the group, but around them. So I just find that really fascinating.
Yeah. And then...
No, go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick. But how you were saying about winding them up, there is, so when they come to set, there'll be like a producer or someone, and they would sit down with a cast member, and they'll be like, okay, so, like, how are you feeling? What, and then they'll just kind of let them talk, kind of like a therapy session. And then they'll be like, okay, well, whatever point A you said, that's very interesting. How about when they come over at this party, you talk to them about it. And they'll be like, you know, they could either be like, yes, I actually do want to ask her about that. Or they'll, you know, if there is some like pushback of like, I don't know, I'm not really kind of feeling it. They're like, well, I don't want to tell you this, but person X did say this and that about you. And then they'll be like, hey, that's not cool. And, you know, and it kind of, there might be some of that happening. Yeah.
I would call that manipulation. That's what I would call that, if I'm being honest. And that's part of what makes me fascinated and why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because it's like that. It's like it's real, but it's manufactured based on manipulation of people who behind the scenes have a vested interest, i.e. money, right?
Yeah.
So I do think like that is the kind of like ugly underbelly of all of this that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, Amanda, let me ask you, so in whichever way you kind of want to share about this, working on Vial files and, you know, having some of these similar experiences that we're talking about, is there any particular situation or like best experience, worst experience, just most surprising? Is there anything that you want to share kind of on this front?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind is not actually from Vial Files. It's like a conversation that we had with Jackie, who is an amazing story editor. She's worked on shows like Big Brother and Perfect Match. And she was someone who we got to interview for one of the earlier episodes. And I was struck by how much I was like, I inherently trust this person. And I think this is a person who tries to do right by people. And it was really interesting hearing her kind of response of like when we talked about alcohol on set and how she was like, I mean, for me, it's kind of a nightmare when people are slurring their words. I'd rather they be sober so that way we actually have usable footage. Whereas like my boyfriend works in the industry, like, you know, he works in lighting. He's not part of like, you know, the sort of like production potential manipulator side of things, but he's had, you know, he shared things about being like, it was disgusting the way that there's someone crying and they walk over with a bottle of champagne and like how alcohol is very much used in that way. So I think like, just in terms of those non-Vial Files experiences, just knowing the range of approaches that exists. And then I think through Vial Files, like just getting to meet so many people, not just people who are on shows, but people behind the scenes of producers. Like I think a big takeaway I had was just that like, yeah, there's some people who are wonderful and great at their jobs and kind and are really doing their best to make television that's like compelling and interesting.
Yeah.
But there's so many agendas that can get kind of Trojan horsed in. And it kind of, for me, it just makes me fascinated with the machine more so than like, because I think sometimes it's like this idea that like, oh, there's evil producers. Like who are like that there's like these people, these specific master manipulators who go in and cause all the chaos, as opposed to this like capitalist system of like larger like network notes and like the executives who are like, you know, kind of determining what happens, the viewers who are with their own viewership of stuff that they might be saying is abhorrent and disgusting, but like are still watching. Like I just think my biggest takeaway was like, oh wow, like you really can't judge the caliber of each individual within this, but it's really important to zoom out and look at it as like a system of power.
Right.
Because like you do walk in knowing this is part of the job, that they will, you know, they're going to tinker, you know, with your feelings a little bit. But it's like consensual tinkering of feelings.
Consensual tinkering.
And that's like second base, not consensual tinkering.
Yeah, that might be the name of this podcast episode.
But you don't know kind of like where like you said, the boundaries start getting blurry, and that's where you get lost in the sauce a little bit.
Well, and I think, it does make sense. And I think that, you know, so clinically, I kind of look at everything on a spectrum. Okay. Yeah. Is that a spectrum of behavior? And what I always like to say is that in every profession, whether it's therapy, psychiatry, police officer, lawyer, whoever, there are good and bad actors in all scenarios, right?
Yes.
There are people who go into things with more pure intentions, people who go into them with not pure intentions, and then lots of people in the middle.
Yeah.
So kind of what we're talking about here is this ability to like be aware of that, because you made this a profession. So it's like you're sensitive, authentic people who have gone into this space trying to like be aware of some of the pitfalls. But I just imagine it sometimes being like an apocalyptic thriller specifically for the two of you, of like, you're just dodging meteors and you're like,
Totally. Something our phenomenal producer Maddie said once that I've like said before, I will never stop repeating because I thought it was so brilliant, was like, she was like, I think you guys are really trying to create like a gentle space on the internet. Yeah. And it sounds like an oxymoron. Like it really does. And so I think like that is like what you described is exactly, I think sometimes how it feels of like, okay, how do we cater to what people find interesting and what gets their attention while like doing it in a way that doesn't make us feel gross about ourselves as people. And also that's just like what we set out to do with this show.
Yeah.
I feel that so deeply. I feel like we are like, I should be like your third pea in a pod, because I'm like, I feel that so deeply. It's like, sometimes I swear I tell myself, I'm like, I don't know why I did this. I am too sensitive for this. Like, pull the ripcord, get out. I can't deal with one more person on the internet telling me that I'm a piece of crap. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, I guess what we're all saying is we just find our ways to kind of navigate the best we can, have dignity, like have our own dignity and integrity, try to have fun in the process, and just like avoid the mines. And if you step on one, just like get help for it.
Yes.
Right? That's kind of what we're all trying to do.
Absolutely. Because at the core of it, like, we love humans humaning. Like it is so fascinating and interesting to see humans just be human. Like just trying to survive in this world. Yeah.
A magnifying glass. I'm like, oh my God, this is so interesting. It's fascinating. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And that's what we want to keep exploring, and I think, but it's like, like you said, like the internet could kind of take the fun out of exploring humans. Sometimes. And and I think the luxury that I have that the cast members of Vanderpump doesn't quite have is that I have like a separate life outside of my job. Like I have my friends, my comedy, I have my thrifting world, all these other, like,
your Duracell ad, your Watch What Happens Live appearance.
Yes,
honey. Yes,
I saw Duracell batteries. I said, I'm going to get some. I passed by them the other day. I thought of Anne, and then I said, I'm going to purchase some Duracell. So.
Boom.
Thank you.
Anne's ad is working, everyone. Give
her
more
money. People were
influenced.
influenced.
Yeah, I'm influenced, man. Absolutely. I was like so two things. I was so proud to see that for you, but then there was a part of me that's like, what on earth must that be like for her emotionally? Sincerely, like, again, you're used to not necessarily being in the limelight, and then here you are thrust into an ad and Watch What Happens Live. Like, what has that been like for you, Anne?
Oh, it's been wild, and I'm having a blast, and I love Bravo so much. Like in the 3 years that I worked for Tom, I just delve into like every show. I'm working my way through the Housewives series. Like I've become such a fan. So I feel like I kind of led into this like circle a little bit, which is really
the Bravo gates have been opened and you've been welcomed in.
Yeah. It's very exciting, like as a fan, being from like a fan to like, oh my God, the Andy's standing right in front of me. Like this is so crazy.
I would have been apoplectic. I would have been fully catatonic, lost my words, like drooling out of one side of my mouth. I don't even understand how you even did that. I would have been like a chihuahua. I would have been like, oh my God, I can't. How did you looked so, right, Amanda? Did she look calm and collected?
I was so, Anne, because she's my wife and like the most generous person in the world and like takes me with her wherever she can. Like I got to be in the front row watching that and I was like, I can't believe she's doing this right now. I am almost shitting my pants vicariously just thinking about it. And she is up there just being like vibrant and sunshine and like smiling. And it's like so cool to watch. And also to like have known that we've had development meetings where like looking for potential like business partners. Where when they've asked us about our career goals, like in January, hearing Anne say, I would love to be bartender, and then like watching it come true a few months later, it's just like, like, I don't know. I just think Anne has been like working so hard in LA. Like she's lived here much longer than I have, has like just been like grinding away and formed all these connections. And so even though it does feel very roller coaster, I think right now, for me at least, it's like, oh yeah, like this is the product of like so many years of work.
Oh,
like
thank
so
you.
much work, so much training.
I would say it did kind of feel like being in an improv show. Like we do live improv theater shows, comedy shows, and like it's kind of a smaller studio, so it really did feel like we perform at like a black box theater, and I was like, oh, this like kind of translates into the black box theater experience a little bit.
Okay.
And I love that so much. So I'm like, oh, I get to do that in like this like bigger setting, which feels like I feel so lucky and blessed. Hashtag blessed, baby. Blessed on blessed on blessed.
I mean, no, please, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No. Just one last quick thing is that, like, I've been in a lot of commercials and played, like, other people, but this is the first time in my life where I played myself, essentially, and that blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. That's all.
Yeah, no, but you were reading my mind, because that was the point that I found interesting, because I was looking up some of your credits, and it says you were on The Office, and I wrote it down, and now I can't find it. You've been
Two Broke Girls.
Thank you. Two Broke Girls.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's like being, playing somebody else it feels more safe and comfortable. But when you're on Watch What Happens Live playing Anne, like being you, that's a whole different level of vulnerability that I think mentally can be, impactful, right?
Yeah.
When you're getting just acknowledgement for who you are, I think that that is a really special thing. And so what I want to do is I just want to tell everyone listening to this, please check out their podcast. It is called We Signed an NDA. Now, your first episode aired January 30th. You currently have 16 episodes, and you so it looks like you have guests on each episode.
Yeah.
And the podcast is available anywhere, but you also have a Patreon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're very bad at Patreoning, but we're putting our hearts into it. We promise.
I think hopefully people benefit from the fact that we're bad at it, because we put a lot of really unfiltered stuff.
Oh, yeah. It is. Our Patreon's unhinged. Like, truly. Yeah.
Well, hot to every single person listening to this running to Patreon, because there's nothing more great than an unhinged moment on Patreon. I think that's amazing.
You can get an upskirt photo.
Snap. Well, I did not expect that. Okay. Of who?
What happened, the little backstory is we did this like photo shoot, just the two of us, for like our ads and stuff for our podcast. 80% of these photos were unusable because we didn't realize that Amanda was flashing the camera and like all the photos.
Oh,
it's
my
underwear.
God.
It's underwear, folks.
It's underwear. Yeah, you don't see anything. It's underwear. Yeah. But we just thought, we thought that was so funny. And we're
so
like,
funny.
well, let's
go through.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yep. Another one that my underwear's in. Okay.
Great.
Oh, that one's cute. Nope. Oh, there's a triangle.
Shot.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we're like, let's put this to use some way.
Listen, I love it. So please, I want you both to promote, so not only the podcast, but anything else that you want to promote, your social media, like whatever. Please plug and promote.
Yay. Okay, yeah. My Instagram is Mickey Ann Maddox. That's my full name, my birth name. Mickey's my Japanese name. I'm Japanese American. MIKIANNMADDOX. Same as TikTok. And I'm on Cameo as Ann Maddox, Tom's assistant. Fast thumbs, pew pew pew.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love that.
And does good cameos.
Well, based on this podcast, I'm like, I think I'm going to order one. Okay. And Amanda, please promote all of it.
Oh yeah. If you go to Lifford the Big Red Dog, maybe once a financial quarter, you'll see a post from me. But no, I swear I'm trying to be better about like promoting other stuff. So I feel like, yeah, if you're so inspired, Lifford the Big Red Dog will be the portal to anything that I do. I will try to put it on there. And if you're in LA and you like indie improv.
Yes.
Yeah.
Come see us do
Seriously.
improv.
Yes,
and
yeah,
please
so-
follow our Instagrams for that.
Yes.
Okay, because that's what I was going to say. I don't know. You guys don't know this. I'm an improv and stand-up comedy junkie. Junkie. Like, if I lived in LA, I would be doing it all. Like, I talked to Justin Martindale. I love the medium so much.
Yay.
And I feel like in another life I could have done that, but like my crippling anxiety and stage fright, like I have a hard enough time doing this.
Well, if you ever change your mind, come to LA. We'll improv together. It'll be so much fun. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much. This has been, I feel like the time has gone by so fast.
Yeah.
This has been such an amazing conversation. You both are welcome back literally anytime. Anytime. You are friends of the show. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. So kind. Like, it's so cool to like have an interview with like, I don't know, you're just like the way that you conduct everything is just so like, I just feel so safe and just like know that you're not trying to ask like any weird gotcha questions, but just like you're like such a good interviewer who's so thoughtful. So like this has been like such a joy to do.
Yeah, these are the conversations Amanda and I love to have. So this is such a blessing on blessing on blessing.
Yes,
hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed that we're now all connected and love it so much. So thank you so much to everyone listening. Please check them out on social media. Please don't forget to check me out on social media at Your Bish Therapist. And please go ahead, give the podcast a 5-star review. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And I can't wait to hear everybody's feedback about all of this. So for now, we'll say ta-ta. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.